Hello and welcome to the SRAM Send It Series. This is race number 2. I'm Matthew Keenan, joined by Pat Shaw. Last week, Pat, we saw an aggressive, explosive race, and I'm looking forward to more of the same action today.
Well, the fantastic thing about the SRAM Send It Series is they're short and sweet stages. Okay, 20Ks can be tiring, and especially for myself at the moment with the current position I'm in physically. But how's the pace that they were racing at last week? We dominated both courses in men's and women's events, and it was aggressive all the way. Tonight has other challenges, though.
Yeah, it was a brutal course last week in terms of the speed. This week is slightly longer than last week. It's the Watopia Jungle. You know it a little bit better than I do, so why don't you take us through it?
Well, this is a little bit like the Bologna individual time trial, Matt Keenan. Do you put the gravel bike on so you've got an advantage on the dirt roads, or do you stay with the road bike, push a bit harder in the gravel sections, but have the advantage for the finish, which finishes on sealed roads, and you could have that little bit of an advantage to win? My advice, gravel bike. You're on the gravel longer than you're on the sealed road. Ride the gravel bike and then try and win the finish.
And try and keep those biscuits for the all-important dash to the line, which we've seen over the series in the past, last year and last week, can be all-important. In terms of some of the riders to watch, we've got some riders that are on the brink of taking the next step up to being amongst the very best in the world. And last week, one of the riders that I kept getting messages about was Nicole Frayne. I got messages from about 3 or 4 people. Keep your eye on Nicole. She'll be a factor in this race. And she'll be a factor in the National Road Series on Zwift, and she has proven to be a rider to watch. She'll be one that we're looking for tonight.
Certainly, and there are several other riders, and I think that, in fact, we've got Bree Vine live cam again tonight, and we really appreciate that access. It's fantastic to have that access. So Bree Vine, she's got to be one of the favourites for this evening's event. Georgia Whitehouse, she was so strong last year in the SRAM Send It Series, so I expect to see big things from her as well.
And Bree Wilson, she won the SRAM Send It Series last year and got second on the weekend in the National Road Race Series, which is an invitational event. That was race number 2 in that series. She's super strong on the climbs, another rider who's really experienced in Zwift racing. And Tess Wright, who you mentioned last week, she's just 16 years of age, the South Australian. She's had a couple of top 10 placings so far in the races that she's done in the SRAM Send It Series and in the National Road Series, where she's had a 5th place finish. She's certainly a rider that we're going to keep an eye on tonight. And given that she's 16 years of age, Pat, not for 10 years to come, potentially for 20 years to come, she's got a huge future ahead of her.
Oh, certainly. And South Australia has this knack of accessing young talent at the right time. So she will use this as a lot of confidence building and great for the morale pre-real life racing, hopefully later in the year. But it's just fantastic to see, particularly that 16, 17-year-old access to racing against the best domestic riders around.
And let's not forget last week's winner, Jen Arnold, who took out the win last week. So she has to be a factor. She's proven that she's got the legs to be a real contender tonight. One of the all-important talking points and strategic points of these events, Pat, is the power-ups. Now, you always take the mickey out of me saying this one you would like, Matt. Let's be honest, Pat. I'd like to be able to use all of them at once for the whole race.
Well, that would be interesting if you could combine them, but unfortunately you only get one for each time you pass a sprint banner or a start-finish line. The Aero Power-Up, my favourite, makes you more aerodynamic for 15 seconds. The Van, well, this is what I use mostly in real-life racing. Drafting effect by 50% for 30 seconds. That's fantastic. The Burrito Breakaway, probably the best named power-up, makes you undraftable for 10 seconds, making it easier to make a breakaway. The lightweight, which we saw well used on the weekend in the National Road Series, reduces your weight by 9.5 kilograms for 15 seconds. And I think this is the one you would like to use the most, Matt Cannon. That's the invisibility. Makes you invisible to all other riders for 10 seconds in the race. And that gives you a real bonus. You can make a great attack at that point and form a very solid breakaway.
Well, we're just on around about 30 seconds or so, perhaps less, before the race gets underway. Let's head down to the pens where the riders are ready and waiting for the flag to drop and the racing to get underway. In fact, we're inside 15 seconds to go. So it's the moments before the racing starts. The build-up is on for race number 2 in the SRAM Send It Series. This is the second of 8 weeks. Jen Arnold was the winner of week number 1, and we're on board with Bree Vine. Pat, they're away.
They are, and they're going to be pushing high watts straight away from the beginning. And this is where it's interesting. You've got some sealed roads at the start, but then they're going to be on the gravel. And it looks like the predominant amount of the field does have the gravel bike, as we see the live cam of Bree Vine, who races for this series for Team Aero, a new team on the virtual racing circuit, and one that's making big headlines as they keep gaining better and better riders signing up for their team. 340 watts out of the pens, Matt Keenan. Don't mind it if you do.
And somehow she looks relatively composed as we get the inside running with Bree Vine. Her and her husband have been pretty impressive in Zwift racing. In fact, Jay Vine, who'll be racing later this evening in the men's race, who was close to winning on the weekend in the Invitational National Road Series. Bree was also very well placed on Saturday. So between Saturday, Pat, and Tuesday, with such high intensity racing, but relatively short, from a coaching perspective, and you can put that hat on as a coach of many of the riders in these events, what's the recommendation?
Well, the recommendation for mine, Matt Keenan, is that they hydrate more than anything, because they just are phenomenal how much work goes into these races. We had a look at last week's numbers, but also it's about utilising the power-ups at the perfect time. We've already spoken about the power-ups, and so often we see those who execute them to perfection win. And on the weekend with Jay Vine, that's what happened. He ran out of legs, but it was the use of the power-ups coming from behind that won the race. And this could be a real chance tonight. The use of, say, the lightweight power-up on the difficult sections through the jungle could really be the difference maker. And already we see significant gaps already opening up because of just how hard they've gone. This is harder than last week already.
It is. This is incredibly quick. And having spoken to Greg Henderson, who rode the men's event, obviously, not the women's event, where he finished in 9th position, he said that the first few minutes was so tough that he was sitting at around about 800 watts just to fight for a position up the front. And it was so important to spend that energy early and get a position towards the front of the race. But he said then afterwards, he stayed in the fetal position in the shower for around about 30 minutes once the race had actually finished.
Yes, a lot of riders won't have a great night's sleep after this, as we're looking at Nicole Frayne now, and she's one of the favourites. And 325 watts, a low cadence though, not renowned for low cadence is Nicole Frayne. So we'd expect to see that pump up. And just 169 beats per minute, 170 now. That shows that she's still in a relatively good controlling position of herself, particularly cardio-wise. But we already see this group is down to around 17, 18 riders, which is huge. The gaps are opening up early, so that means the riders are going hammer and tongs straight out of the gun tonight. 3 minutes or thereabouts, but 2.5 kilometres really does show the severe pace that they've set.
Just on Nicole Frayne once again, we spoke about her a lot on Saturday, in particular in the National Road Series race, and she obviously heard the feedback about how often we spoke about it, and she sent a message to say thank you for the commentary and the kind words. It wasn't through trying to be nice to Nicole. She earned every single word and every single piece of praise that was heaped upon it because of the way she raced in round 1 of the SRAM Send It Series, the way she raced in round 1 and 2 of the National Road Series, and she's picked it up exactly where she left off as we move into round 2 of the SRAM Send It Series. She is riding brilliantly, and I think we're going to talk about her for the rest of the season. She's making some huge gains this year.
Oh yes, certainly, and you know we did have the heads up that she was in good form, so that gives us the ability to be a little bit more cautious and attentive to her as we look at Bree Wilson now from Rock Salt SRAM 226. Like that revs per minute, personally, that 99, 95 to 100 revs per minute really makes it sustainable. Yes, she has a higher heart rate at 183 as a cause of riding at a higher cadence, but certainly it will give her an opportunity later in the race to have fresher legs. So my advice, particularly to younger riders that have less experience, obviously Bree Wilson has a lot of experience, but try and keep that cadence a bit higher. You're going to have the ability to follow attacks later in the event if you do that, rather than grinding out the gears just yet. And
towards the back of the peloton at this point, but she's been riding pretty well from the Rock Salt attacker team throughout the series. And just a reminder, in this series, there's 170 plus riders on the start line in round 2 of the SRAM Send It Series for the women. To win the big prize, you don't have to win the race. You just have to ride every single race, all 8 of the races, to go in with a chance to win one of 2 SRAM Force ETAP Axis disc group sets, along with a pair of the brand new Zip 303S wheel sets. That's a pretty good prize. This is Tess White from the South Australian Sports Institute. This is the 16-year-old showing herself up the front pretty early, and I think, Pat, she's going to show herself up at the front at the end of the race.
We hope so, and we spoke about her just before everything got kicked off for the night, and she is an exciting young talent. And the Whites in South Australia have been renowned for particularly their track results, but certainly she has also shown over the summer that she has the ability on the road as well. So it's great to see her going well. Another one of our great favourites from the summer, Matt Keenan, Alana Foster is in the field tonight as well. So a big shout out to Alana. We had a lot of fun meeting Alana over the summer, and she has some great stories. So it's fantastic to see new people coming to Zwift as well. So Alana, big shout out.
Well, it'll be really intriguing to see how she goes in this format, because what we saw from Alana Foster, Dr. Alana Foster, I might add, throughout the summer of cycling in Australia was that she had the horsepower, and there she is up towards the front. She's got a little bit to learn tactically and positioning-wise within the peloton, but we're seeing here that she has the physical makeup to be a factor in any of the races once they get back out onto the road. And this short, sharp intensity will suit her really well. And she's another example also of the level of education within the women's peloton. And this is a woman who's racing for fun. She's really enjoying it. But we've found out throughout the coronavirus, Pat, she's somebody who has an essential job. She's a doctor, and she's out there saving lives and keeping the community safe.
Shows you her endurance, Matt Keenan, 156 beats per minute, and she struck into our sights at the the Bay Criterium, should I say, the Lexington Blackburn Bay Criterium Series earlier in the year, where she tried to jump across the gap to Ruby Roseman Gannon and none other than Amanda Spratt. She couldn't quite get there, but she was the next best across the line, and she beat some really strong riders on that event, and that's what really brought it to the forefront of our attention. But as we learnt more and more, her story is many pages long, and so we wish her all the best. I hope she gets a good result. I think this suits her. I think this really suits her, this type of racing. As we get back to Vine Cam, I'm going to call it tonight, because I'm sure we'll have Jay later on as well. 164 beats per minute, so really well under control there. And you can see, because they're in the more difficult part of the course at 3 and 4%, that speed has dropped down to the mid-30s. We were almost hitting 55 earlier, so certainly on the more difficult part of the course now. And unfortunately, Lisa Jacob with a mechanical, so we won't be talking about Lisa Jacob so much this week, but we will give her a shout out and an apology again for last week's error. But now she's well and truly on our cam.
Oh, what a shame. We'll talk about her in just a moment. Briefly, though, on Brie Vine, you spoke about her heart rate, which we had a chance to take a look at, sitting around the 165 mark. Last week, where she finished in second place in round 1 of the SRAM Send It Series, she had an average heart rate of 175 beats per minute with a max of 189. So she's still got plenty of room to open up the throttle. Speaking of heart rates, Lisa Jacob was somebody that I did want to talk about, and I was anticipating that we'd see her up towards the front because she was really aggressive in round 1. She had an average heart rate last week, Pat. You're sitting down? An average heart rate last week of 200 with a max of 210. Phenomenal.
Yes, when my heart rate's 200, Matt, I'm only in one place. That's the back of an ambulance, because my heart does not go that hard. It speaks volumes for her capacity as an athlete. So we look forward to, unfortunately, a mechanical tonight, but I'm sure she'll be back next week for another race. And that's the great thing about the SRAM Send It Series. It's every Tuesday evening for 8 weeks. And as you mentioned before, particularly I want to focus on the SIP 303 S's, which I made a phone call earlier in the week and ordered a set of those wheels. You've got to look into them. Lifetime warranty as well. So there's some great perks behind some of these products that are coming out in this next 12-month period. But certainly these ZIP 303Ss, they look remarkable. A carbon fibre wheel, but they'll be good enough to train on as well. So that's how I'll be using them.
I like the idea of using those just to get around with the local bunch ride, because on my local bunch ride out of Peak Cycles, so often you end up with the likes of James Whelan in the off-season. Mitch Docker can be there as well, and Sarah Gigante regularly is out there to taunt us weekend warriors. Just inside the 14 kilometre to go mark, so they've covered almost 8Ks. Brie Vine still up towards the front, so too Alana Foster. She's a regular towards the front end of this peloton. Laura Luxford has been regularly seen up towards the front, and Nicole Frame is another one who's not too far away. There are the numbers for Laura Luxford. She's got a pretty high heart rate at this point, Pat. That's getting desperately close towards the red zone, up towards the 190 mark.
Yes, well, some riders have that capacity, Matt, and particularly we're seeing more and more of that over the past weeks as we almost have gathered a larger database of riders to gather information off. We can see that, average heart rates on Zwift are quite high, and I think you'll find predominantly that reason is because there's no freewheeling on Zwift platform. If you freewheel, you will lose your speed and you will get dropped. But another question, it's just come through on Facebook. It's Russell Menzies. He wants to know who are all the mountain bikers. And we spoke about it earlier, but you might have missed it, Russell. The mountain bikes are for the gravel sector. And on this course, I believe it's worth about 10 seconds advantage compared to the same power produced on the road bike. So there is an advantage. However, we finish on a sealed road at the finish of today's stage. So the mountain bikes and gravel bikes won't be quite as strong as a road bike at that particular point. But certainly with the length of this sector on gravel, it seems the choice of many tonight.
And Antoinette de Jong is the rider now at the front who's forcing the pace. Just briefly back to Laura Luxford, who's shown herself at the front. She's responded to this move of de Jong. So Luxford has gone up to the front. We saw her heart rate just a couple of moments ago towards the 190 mark. Pat, last week she finished in 15th position. She had an average heart rate of 191 with a maximum heart rate of 195. So her ability to push herself to the max and sustain it shows her mental strength. That's tough work.
Well, yeah, and it also probably amplifies the fact that she knows her boundaries, she knows her limits, and she knows that she can stick within that parameter as we see more information coming through now of Brie Hargrave. And knowing your limitations, Matt, is the biggest part of being successful in the sport of cycling, because a lot of the time you are pushed to your what we call threshold. Now, if you know what your limitations are, you can slip into the wheels and draft a bit to survive that extra 500 metres or so and then make the difference later in the race. So knowing that is really important, but we can see still pushing close to 300 watts all the time. Staying around that 80 to 90 revs per minute is Brie Hargrave, and that is really, really a nice sweet spot. Her heart rate, though, Matt Keenan, pushing towards 190, and they're scary numbers for me because my max heart rate as a racer was about 185, so it's a significant number for me to look at. But as I said before, we see numbers like this all the time on Zwift, and I think that she's looking really good tonight.
And they're forcing a good split. This is a strong group that's going forward at the front. They've opened up a handy little gap over the rest of the race. They're scurrying, though, to try and get across. They know how quickly a group can ride away on a course like this as they go across the gravel, the mountain bikes in full effect. You've mentioned a couple of times, Pat, the importance of choosing the right equipment. Back on board with Brie Vine, Antoinette de Jong, Laura Luxford. This is the front group. It's been de Jong and Luxford who were the first two to really force the tempo.
Yeah, they're forcing the tempo, but that second group keeps trying to get back, keeps trying to make contact all the time. Great to see Alana Foster. She's showing us that it was worthwhile bringing her up earlier in the comms. But also the major player in this that we've been speaking about a lot, and on our live cam, Brie Vine. She's right there and in the mix of it as well. Matt Kenneth, this is a really, really strong group of riders. But once they get off the this sector, which is a downhill sector, it's probably more important you have a group that works on the downhill almost than the uphill. So it's important that this group continues to work together, but certainly a really nice selection being caused here.
This is Jenny Pettinan, the mother of a couple of kids who lives in Alphington, neighbouring suburb to me. She is chasing desperately, trying to get across. But on your own, it's so difficult against the big numbers. And the huge disadvantage, even though it is a descent, there's not that moment where you can just clutch, get off the pedals, suck in the big ones, coast in the slipstream, even momentarily. That is the brutality of Zwift racing and the SRAM Send It Series.
Oh, for certain. And I mean, in real life racing, you'd be looking at this camera position and going, oh, they're right there, I can nearly touch them. And you'd believe, and as a friend of mine, Joe Cooper, would always say, believe and achieve. And you could definitely do that. But in Zwift, you just that one surge of pace, or they get around the corner, they've got the downhill sector, all of a sudden it pops out to 15 seconds. That's really hard to catch up. And it's going to be difficult for Jenny, but we're a big fan of her. She sits in 9th position at the moment, so she's not that far off the back. As now we look at Tia Froome, and she's pushing a good cadence of 91 with a 165-ish heart rate. that's a very, very tangible target for her. If she can sit around there, she's going to have some room to accelerate. So she's obviously recovered really well on this downhill sector. And for those at home wondering what the glowing blue things are in the back pockets of the riders, they're ride-ons. They're kudos, if you like, if you're a Strava fan. That's kudos. So as they're riding along, you'll see the thumbs up coming on. They're ride-ons, and they sit in the back pockets. So if you get more and more, well, technically they might be weighing you down a little bit.
This is Nicole Frayne up towards the front. The bad news for Jenny, Pat, we had her at 3 seconds when we were watching her chasing and encouraging her to try and get across. It's now slipping out to 6 seconds. But importantly for Jenny, she's got a 6-second gap then to the next chaser behind her, which is Fitzgerald. This could be a tough, almost 10-kilometre individual time trial for her to hold on for a top 10 finish. Tough way to go about it, but it's worth the fight.
Yeah, well, don't mind you if you do, Jenny Pettinan. You're gapping Justine Barrow, Bree Wilson, Sam Dorita, Emily Watts. I mean, this is a good third group on the road. So she's just missed to hang on in this front group of 8 riders. She's just behind them, which just shows how much strength she does have. So keep fighting as we look at Marie-Louise Fitzgerald, who sits in this third group. Well, second group, but it's in between, is in Jenny Pettinan. So she's right in there with Emily Watts, as we just said. Also, Justine Barrow, who took the victory on Saturday in the National Road Series in that cracking finish at New York After Party. She was phenomenal, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was really impressive. Mary-Louise Fitzgerald in amongst the chasing group. The lead group, it consists of Kath Mackay from the Australian Hump Day Ride team. Alana Foster is in the front group. So too is Bree Vine from Team Aero. Katie Banerjee is there from DeWes. She's been riding really strongly throughout today's race. Bree Hargrave is in that front group. Laura Luxford, Nicole Frayne. That is the composition of the leading group of 7 riders. That is what it is down to. Or is Rebecca Mack? No, she is still there. We've mentioned her. So that is the leading group of 7 riders, Pat.
Yes, and just quickly, Matt, I like to bring up, what do you listen to when you're racing? Do you listen to us or do you listen to some music? Because Peter Mullins this week, she's put out her workout playlist for you to access. And I think that's going to be fantastic for people to test out, see what does drive Peter Mullins when she's training indoors or potentially outdoors. And that playlist is available via the Zwift platform.
I'm looking forward to seeing what her music choices are. We've got the notes in front of us here. And a couple of the hits from the Peter Mullins playlist. Walking on Sunshine by Katrina and the Waves. I'm pretty happy with that. Nice start. Locked Out of Heaven by Bruno Mars. My 8-year-old son would be delighted with that one. And Here I Go Again by The White Snake. That's not a bad start by Peter Mullins. Worth taking a look at.
That's more my flavour there. So Peter Mullins, obviously one of our greatest female athletes in Australian cycling. So if you want to listen to her playlist, then go and have a check out. Maybe play it for your next session. See how you go. Alana Foster, 269 watts, 93 revs per minute. She's really moving well, Matt Keenan, and potentially looks like the favourite to take out tonight's stage.
Her heart rate looks really low relative to everybody else, but to get some context on it, we need to know what her maximum heart rate is, obviously. But she seems pretty composed at 7.7 kilometres to go.
Yes, and remembering that she weighs in at about 57 kilograms, so on the tougher parts of the circuit, her watts per kilo is very high. Kath Mackay, great to see her being factored on the screen here, because she was the one that instigated this move, and she actually slipped off the front momentarily. 280 watts, 69 revs per minute, loves a lower cadence, and that is relative to her low heart rate. Remembering, if you're pushing a higher cadence, that cardiovascular side is going to be more important, so your heart rate's going to push a bit high. If you seem to be struggling in an event and your heart rate's peaking out a little bit, getting too high, slip down at the back of your gears a couple of cogs harder. It'll lower your cadence and potentially will assist you to drop your heart rate. And by dropping your heart rate, who knows, you might just get that one extra attack in you and it'll get you that podium finish that you've been searching for.
Importantly, Pat, in this leading group, in terms of the results from last week and consistency across the series, Breakaway is in the leading group. She was second last week. Nicole Frayne is in the leading group, and she was in third position last week. Katie Banerjee, she was 10th last week. She's also in this front group. So they're looking to continue the good results from 1 week ago.
Yes, I'm just trying to see on the screen if there's anyone in this group that has the road bike, but I don't think they do. I think they've all gone with a smart selection. No, they do. There is a rider in there. I just got to see. It must be Banerjee. No, it's Alana Foster who has the road bike, Matt Keenan. So that's going to be an interesting game changer once they come out the other side in around 5 kilometres time.
That's her in the middle back of the pack. Alana Foster, one of the newer names to Australian cycling, as Antoinette de Jong is applying the pressure. She's punching out 330 odd watts. She's opened up a little bit of a gap. Is it time to start to think about using one of the power-ups, Pat, and see if she can extend this advantage and drive it home?
Well, certainly she's used the draft power-up. Not probably the best way to use it because she obviously has no one to draft off, but maybe she was also using that power-up in hope that she picks up another one along the track. 6.3 kilometres to go, 15 kilometres covered in 22 and a half minutes. She's really pushing the watts though, 6.7 watts per kilo. At a good high cadence, 93 should I say, but her heart rate starting to climb. Sector, this false flat, 2% uphill. Well, she's created a nice gap here. 2 seconds back to Frayne, and also there with Frayne, looks like it is Banerjee that's coming through as well to get across. Hargrave there, Bree Vine, Kath McKay, she's there as well. So Alana Foster right at the back. This is the time to hang on, Matt Keenan. The game is being decided. Who can take it out tonight? Laura Luxford looking strong as well.
This is a big move. The advantage, it's stretched out now. 4 seconds is the lead. We're back on board with Laura Luxford. She's at 191 beats per minute. That was her average heart rate for the race last week in round 1 of the SRAM Send It Series. This is round 2, the second round in 8 rounds. We're here every Tuesday through to the end of June. Laura Luxford, she's near the roof of her heart rate, Pat.
Wow, so we all would be if we're in this particular circumstance. This is where the race is being split up quite strongly. It's de Jong out in front. She's got a 5-second gap. Not showing up on Zwift Power, though, which concerns me. It means she's probably not registered, which is going to be an issue when results are released. But de Jong, 5-6 seconds now, and there's a little bit of split happening in this group. We can now see lightweight feather power-ups going, which is reducing their weight by 9.5 kilograms for the next 15 seconds. And you can see Laura Luxford, she's using one of them, and as it's flashing, it's reducing. Now she's used her 15 seconds. She's used it to her advantage, surged to the front of the pack, and wants to bring back de Jong. I just don't know how long de Jong can hold this 5+ watts per kilo, Matt Keenan, without any recovery, with still 5 kilometres remaining in the race.
What I do know is that her advantage is continuing to be extended. Here now we're on board with Antoinette de Jong, who's now out to an 8-second advantage. This is a powerful performance. 5.2 kilometres remaining. Making their way through the jungle, heading towards the finish line. But this can be a punishing 5 kilometres, particularly with this gravel 3% gradient. 370 watts or 330 watts I saw. My eyes just went a little bit cross-eyed. It was 330 that I saw, but she's been up towards this high 200s, low 300s now, Pat, for 4 or 5 minutes.
Well, that's right, and she's also doing it at a high cadence. And often when I raced on Zwift, I found that the higher cadence was an advantage. It allowed you to maintain the power a lot longer, and also the surges if you wanted to lift. Now, if you do a strong surge and push up to 400-500 watts, even though that slows down quite, you'd see that gradual slowdown and probably pick up an extra second or so. Look, she looks really strong. 4.7 kilometres to go. She's still pushing above 300 watts quite consistently, which is around 5 watts per kilo for her. And at 95 to 100 revs per minute, McCann, it doesn't look like she's fatiguing at all. Up to 101 revs per minute and just 180 beats per minute. She really looks strong.
Yeah, and she's now continuing to extend that lead. She's out to a 9-second advantage. 4.5 kilometres still remaining. Antoinette de Jong, the Dutch woman who is an Olympian, is driving home her lead after having been probably the most aggressive anyway up until this final attack. And look at those numbers. The wattage is huge.
She is absolutely flying out there. And just as a message comes through from Lisa Jacob, she goes, number one lesson on Zwift, don't touch your screen with a minute to go. And unfortunately, we've got to learn the hard lessons, and she'll probably never do that again. A lot of sympathy out there for her tonight. Unfortunately, she won't be part of the finish. But de Jong, well, an Olympian, but also just absolutely ripping the field apart. And this is a strong group behind Matt Keenan. It's not like they're not trying. In ninth at the moment, Dion Wang, she's pushing a good power as well. Low cadence, but she's on an uphill sector of the course, and this is a great effort for her as well. Back just 43 seconds, should I say, the gap for her at the moment.
Yeah, she rode well in week one as de Jong is leading. She was a bronze medalist at the Winter Olympics in 2018 when she picked up a bronze medal in the speed skating across 3,000 metres. And she also represented the Netherlands at the Winter Olympics in 2014 in Sochi, where she finished in 7th position in the 3,000 metres. So the transition between speed skating and also cycling is quite a well-worn path. It's almost the Northern Hemisphere's equivalent to what rowing is here in Australia.
Yeah. That's what I was about to say, actually. We also, down our way, have a lot of rowers that make the transition, and certainly nearly all of them are actually very successful. So de Jong ripping legs off tonight on a course that seems to suit her. She obviously has a little bit of information as well, because some experience on Zwift, because she's picked that gravel bike or the mountain bike tonight. But I'm interested to see when we come out the other side, do we see a surge of pace from Alana Foster, the only rider in the top 25 on the road bike selection? And does she actually think, well, I have a regret for choosing the road bike because it could have been the difference maker for her tonight? We'll wait and see.
Well, she's also only 25 years of age, so she's got big prospects in terms of a cycling career, and she's going to be one to watch. And she certainly brought herself to our attention over the last 15 minutes or so. In fact, over the last 28 minutes, because she's been consistently at the front. And this lead, Pat, is one that has the rest of that chasing group racing for second place. Surely that's where their psychology is at the moment. The prospect of trying to close down an 11, 12-second gap, which is continuing to grow, surely they're thinking about second now.
Well, certainly, because Antoinette's momentum is not decreasing. It is actually increasing. And as we see her now hitting 50 kilometres an hour, she will absorb that final 2 kilometres at quite the rate, at -4%. So she's on the descent at the moment, still maintaining that 170 to 180 heart rate. But how's the cadence? 108 revs per minute and still putting out the power. That's actually very difficult, Matt Keenan. At a high cadence to produce high power, it's not the easiest thing, but she shows that she's able to do that. Bree Hargrave back in second group. This is the group on the road fighting for the top for the 2 steps below, should I say, on the podium for Subaru Giant Racing Team. She's had a great race tonight, but that heart rate, Matt Keenan, nearly 200 beats per minute.
Yeah, that is into the danger zone. Inside the last 2 kilometres for de Jong. Alana Foster, this could be the bike choice that gets her second place, Pat. But you've spoken about it a few times. We're on board. Her heart rate still looks relatively composed at 165, 167. But we need to know what her max is to really understand, have the context for that. But, Pat, the difference for Alana Foster once they get onto the tarmac as opposed to the gravel between the mountain bike and the road bike, or how much energy she spent on the gravel to try and keep up.
That's right, and that's where you have to measure it up. And tonight, I think that the mountain bike or the gravel bike was definitely the selection to make. But it certainly may be the difference maker for the podium positions tonight at the end. And I think if you're mentally tough, maybe it doesn't make as big a difference as we're making out. But certainly reports are it's worth about 10 seconds through the jungle section. And it's quite a long section, so it's probably percentage-wise not that great. but certainly once we come out the other side, which is very shortly when we see Jong now, 900 metres to go. What a fascinating ride it's been tonight. Laura Luxford making a surge, but it's going to be a bunch of sprinter looks for second and third. But tonight, it's Jong, Antoinette Jong, who's going to take the cake. And she's definitely put her name on the board. Now we just need her to sign up to Zwift Power as well, Matt Keenan, so that we can see her on the results each and every week.
Well, what we do know, she's got pedigree as an athlete. She's a junior world record holder for the 3,000 metres in speed skating. She's an Olympic Games bronze medalist from 2018 in speed skating, and she's still just 25 years of age. She's making an impressive transition to cycling, or is this just part of her training for the next Winter Olympics and continuing her career as a speed skater and chasing a gold medal on the ice? Whichever it is, it's been a joy to watch her performance this evening. Antoinette Jong has dominated this race. The gap now is down to just 9 seconds. They're clawing their way back ever so slightly, but she can finally start to breathe a sigh of relief. 7 seconds. It's not over until it's over. Make sure you get it all the way across the finish line. The race is starting to break up behind her, though, Pat. They're down to just 5 seconds behind. They're chasing for the minor placings. Jong surely has enough to get to the finish line and take the win. But the battle for second is huge. Jong's still out in front. Breakaway is closing in. It's at just 3 seconds now, the gap. The finishing archer waits. Jong to take the points.
And waiting to see who takes out this top position after Jong. It looked like it was Brie Vine and Katie Banerjee that filled out the podium. Nicole Frayne, she tried to follow that surge, and Alana Foster on the road bike, she finishes in fifth, rounding out the top five. Brie Hargrave, a fantastic effort tonight. Kath McKay, who started that breakaway, she was so strong. And Laura Luxford, that was that group of 8 riders that stayed away. Tia Froome coming through in 9th, and Brie Playell for the Subaru Giant Racing Team. Round out the top 10, and 32 minutes. That is absolutely flying, Matt Keenan.
It is, and look at the gap in terms of time from Laura Luxford then to Froome in 9th position. A 38-second gap from 9th place to 1st place. So it was pretty tight up in the front, that leading group, but it shows how much they blew the rest of the race apart. Antoinette Jong, you mentioned it a few times about the importance of Zwift power. Well, what we do know that she had today was a huge amount of power.
Well, it was her sustained effort that won her the bike race today, and we'd love to see her back next week to see how she goes on the other courses as well. But she was phenomenal. She made the surge at the right time, and that's what has allowed her to take a victory.
Well, she'll be one to watch throughout the rest of this series. And then in the minor placings behind her, once again, we take a look to see that it was at Breakaway. She's been so consistent. 2nd place today. It was then Katie Banerjee in 3rd position. The ever consistent again, Nicole Frayne in 4th place. Alana Foster in 5th position. Brie Hargrave in 6th place. Kath McKay in 7th position. Laura Luxford in 8th. It was then Tia Froome and Brie Playell in 10th position.
A really strong race tonight. 32 minutes and 30 seconds to cover the distance. 4.5 watts per kilo shows that it was a very strong race. But look at Banerjee. Obviously did a lot of work on the front, averaging 5 watts per kilo, but still strong enough to take out 3rd.
Well, Pat, we're not too far away from getting the men's race started. They're riding on exactly the same course, exactly the same distance. They've got the same power-ups to be able to utilise. And last week, we saw a fantastic race that was won by Jay Vine.
Well, it was, and he was so strong. He timed his sprint to perfection too, because he was unexpected. It was Olli Jones, and you had such a lead that you even called him. You said, Olli Jones taking this out. All of a sudden, it was like flash out of the comic books. He came from nowhere, and he won by the margin of 0.02 of 1 second. But it was, again, another example of perfect utilisation of the power-ups. Unfortunately, he couldn't double that up for the weekend. But I'm sure Jay will be excited about tonight's stage as well.
He will be. Let's take a look at a couple of the favourites, a few of the riders to look for. Jay Vine, who you spoke about in terms of getting the timing right. He got the timing slightly wrong on Saturday in the National Road Series when he looked to have it sewn up then, and he got pipped by Alastair Johnson and ended up, I think, Jay finished in 4th position in the end.
Yeah, he did, but he did enough to keep the leader's jersey. Olli Jones, who was the protagonist on last week's race, and he hit out a long way from home. He had about 6 seconds lead with 70 metres to go, should I say. But, geez, did he slow down? And Jay Vine, he was shot out of a cannon. Alex West has an immense amount of experience, much like Olli Jones, the two Kiwis, two key riders to watch tonight. Ben Hill, who's been ultra strong throughout the series and also the National Road Series, he's always one to watch. But today's course in particular, with the gravel sector, I think plays more to his advantage. And Chris Aiken, well, didn't he show up something last week? He was really one that came to the forefront of our minds because we don't know a lot about him, but gee, he was a strong performer.
He was. He performed well, finishing in 8th position last week. In terms of somebody not on that list that we should look for tonight, the name that comes to mind for me is Graham Frisley. Graham Frisley was the winner of week number 1 in the Invitational National Road Series on Zwift, and he finished in 3rd position in round 1 of the SRAM Send It Series. Do you think he can cope with this course? He's more of a sprinter. I think he can. What about you?
Well, I think Saturday showed us a lot. He's obviously ultra motivated at the moment, and for him to make the final kilometre on the New York City KOM after party course suggests that he will get through today's stage. Now, if he gets to the finish, that could be a relatively easy sprint for him, but he's going to have a lot of competition. Cam Roberts is another one who will really love this course tonight. He loves the harder courses on Zwift, and this one will be perfect.
Pat, once again, the power-ups, they are important. They were used strategically tonight. Some for survival in the front group, others for the attack. Take us through them.
Well, I always say it. My favourite is the aero power-up, and I think if you use it properly, it wins you the bike race. It makes you more aerodynamic for 15 seconds. The draft boost is worthwhile when a race is splitting and you need that extra increased draft. It'll increase that by 50% for 30 seconds. The Burrito Breakaway, I always call it the best named power-up, but I never got to utilise it. It makes you undraftable for 10 seconds, allowing you to open up that gap that could win you the bike race. The lightweight, well, we've already seen that used in the women's race just earlier, particularly on the false flat sectors of the jungle. It reduces your weight by 9.5 kilograms for 15 seconds. And I always say this too, Matt Keenan, I think this is the one that everyone looks for, the invisibility. It's the newest power-up, and it makes you invisible to all other riders in the race for 10 seconds. A great chance to get a breakaway without them even knowing it.
We're just a couple of minutes to go before they get underway. We'll head down to the pen shortly, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the bike choices are.
Well, I can tell you right now, most of the men will have watched the women's stream, so they'll all be frantically going in and changing their bikes, I can tell you. So I think we expect to see a lot of mountain bikes and a few gravel bikes, but certainly this was going to be another ripper race.
Let's get down to the pens. They're just moments away from getting started, and it looks like there's quite a few mountain bikes in there, but there's still a fair few road bikes, judging by those handlebars that I can see, Pat.
Yeah, but they could be the gravel bike as well. So it's hard to decipher sometimes on screen, but we'll see as soon as we get into the race. Once it starts splitting up, we get a closer look at the bikes, and certainly we can have a closer look at our start list as well. Nick White, obviously, is one we often speak about. Harley Moore is really an interesting one who started to slip up the classifications a little bit. Younger riders to look at, Dalton Stretton, all the way from Tasmania. He's been a really strong performer on Zwift. Lawrence Peters, as we see him from the SMCC COS team. I think that's the COS down team in real life. So he'll be looking for a strong ride tonight, and already at 340 watts. Other riders I was going to bring up was certainly Alex Bogna. He was good last week as well. And some younger riders in there as well. Obviously, Pat Eddy and Sam Eddy. Sam Eddy just recently out of under-19s, but Pat Eddy, the dual national champion. And my man out there tonight, Jesse Norton. He'll be pretty tired, I can tell you, Matt Keenan, because he was working really hard in the bike shop today.
And let's not forget, mountain biking, Dan McConnell is racing tonight, one of Australia's best mountain bikers. And I'd make the argument that across the last 10 years, Dan McConnell has been Australia's leading cross-country mountain bike rider. This could suit Dan.
It certainly should suit him. I think it also, I don't know if Trekkie's in there tonight, but it would certainly suit Trekkie Johnson as well. Just having a look at the start list. Graham Frisley right up there all the way at the start, Matt Keenan. So he's already showing us that he's really interested in getting a good result again tonight.
So too Mark O'Brien. He was right up towards the front. Mark O'Brien really consistent all year round. It's as if Mark O'Brien doesn't have an off season.
Oh, well, he never does. He's always been renowned for that. I've been in many teams with Mark O'Brien. I've raced him since I was, I think, 14 or 15 years of age, and he's always been renowned for living on his bike. He struggled to take a break, but I think that's what makes him a great coach as well. It's good to see Zach Johnson in the field tonight. We haven't seen Zach all that much recently, so it's good to see him. And I thought Greg Henderson had popped up as well, sitting in about 26th position.
And a name that I've just seen in position number 9, right at the front of the race, is Drew Ginn. We spoke earlier about Antoinette de Jong making the transition from speed skating to cycling, and cyclists coming from a rowing background. What about Drew Ginn? Olympic Games gold medalist, part of the awesome foursome, and based on the numbers that he puts out on the bike, including that bid at the 24-hour record that he made at the Brunswick Velodrome, that will be the Drew Ginn.
Certainly is, and he loves it. He will love us giving him a shout-out as well. I saw up there as well. He was on the race on the weekend, Sam Welsford. He's back again tonight, so great to see him in and amongst it as well. This kind of power output would probably suit him, but when we get onto those 4% and 3% false flats and short pinches, it could hurt him a bit. Sam Jenner in there for Bridge Lane, and also I saw Cam Roberts, the latest addition to the Aero virtual racing team. So that was a great acquisition for them earlier in the week.
Freddie Ovett also up towards the front. Just briefly on Drew Ginn and his 24-hour ride around the Brunswick Velodrome. He had an altitude gain on a velodrome of 1,800 metres. You could almost do an Everesting attempt around the velodrome. I always thought it was a downhill back straight and uphill front straight. Well, he proved it.
Well, he did indeed, and some have said also potentially if he didn't do that, he would have travelled a lot further. So he did get some good elevation gain on a velodrome, which isn't really meant to have much. So it was great to see him out there. Tim Cutler up there in second as well. He's really popular on Zwift. And we spoke about Graham Frisley earlier in the day. He's up there in 5th position still, Matt Keenan, but now the splits are starting to happen from behind.
Yeah, and Graham Frisley, he is a member of the Brunswick Cycling Club, and what they've been doing throughout this coronavirus period is their president, Agostino Giramondo, has been doing a fantastic job of each week doing an interview with one of their riders. He has featured Graham Frisley. The latest one is with Kate Perry, and she gives some great insights into juggling her working career, racing her bike, coaching, and also the insights of a coach and a coach benefiting from racing, which she does, and she's a fantastic coach. She's also doing her own podcast now as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you make there. Being part of particularly a Peloton in which you're coaching riders can also allow you to assist them outside of their training. I often speak about this to my riders that I coach, but I talk about it as not part of the coaching side, but part of the mentoring side, and that is to go in a race where they participate and you watch where they waste energy or they make poor decisions, and then you can bring them up as topic of discussion, because it's always difficult when an athlete that you're looking after goes and does a race and you think, why did they not get a better result? They've got all of the power that they require to get a good result. They're in good condition and good health, and then they tell their story of the race, but they can only tell it from their perspective. And when you've been a racer before and you know what to look for, you get so much better data to utilise from watching them race close up and at first hand. So I totally agree with that point of view, that there's no better way to help an athlete than to see them making their mistakes and help them notice that they are mistakes.
And here is a world-class athlete, Alastair Donohue from ARA Sunshine Coast, showing himself up towards the front. Multiple paracyclist world champion, one of the big prospects for Australia at the 2021 Paralympics in Tokyo.
Yeah, certainly, and he hasn't had any trouble in getting some good results in the National Road Series in real-life racing as well. He was a factor on Saturday, but today's event probably suits him right down to the ground, so it'll be interesting to see what he can produce towards the end of the race. We're already nearly 6 kilometres in under 7 minutes. Thank you very much.
Well, it hasn't thinned out quite as much as the women's race, but there's a lot more starters. From the Zwift Companion, I saw that there was somewhere in the vicinity of 500 riders entered to start this race. They are huge numbers. Here's Olli Jones, one of the big favourites. Impressive last week in round 1 of the SRAM Send It Series when Olli Jones, I thought Olli had it sewn up. I went a little bit early. So too did Olli Jones, and he just got pipped on the line. But we know his form is good and he can win today.
Olli Jones is the equivalent of Ben Hill in virtual cycling. I can tell you that. He loves attacking, he loves breakaways, and he's got a phenomenal ability to harness pain and push through it. Already we see him nearly at 500 watts, 104 revs per minute, and 173 beats per minute. He's a very strong rider, and he is well suited to this type of racing. He races for the Canyon team on Zwift, and he is one of the best-known riders throughout the world in virtual racing. He's certainly going to have his efforts monitored closely by the other riders tonight. And you can see Nick White right around him, so too that of Jay Vine, who was last week's winner.
Well, this is Aidan Sinclair, also up towards the front, as we just switch at the head of the race. Kieran Lewis, good to see one of the members of the Zwift family right on the front. And in terms of the Zwift family, everybody that rides on the platform certainly is part of that family. But he's a guy that actually came to my house and helped me get organised with this setup. So I've got a little bit of a bias, Pat. I'd like to see Kieran do really well.
Yeah, well, he's certainly one that factors in the top 10 often. But he's also one, he gets a little bit too eager at times and takes on the race at the wrong times. But he certainly is a strong one for tonight's race, as is Zach Johnson. We just saw him pop into the top 10. We haven't spoken about him a lot recently, but certainly in previous years and previous seasons, he's been a very strong rider across all levels and all racing across the Zwift platform. Jay Vine back on the Vine live cam, and he's riding for Nero Continental Racing, but fantastic to have access, and we've got to give a big shout out to Jay and Bree for both offering their time last weekend for the National Road Series virtual series and also for the SRAM Send It Series. This is fantastic to have an insight to see just how much suffering quite possibly is going on.
And Bree in the background might be offering a little bit of advice to Jay. The interview that we did with Jay after the National Road Series race on Saturday, where he looked to have it sewn up, he ended up finishing in 4th position, was one of the better interviews that we've heard this year. We were trying to work out whether it was physical or mechanical, and Jay owned it. He said it was physical. I went a little early, and I was cooked in the last couple of 100 metres. I loved that honesty.
Oh, and so did I. And it brings also, what it does is that he legitimately respects those that have beaten him. And I think that's a really good characteristic to have. If you can be happy to admit that you fell short and also commend those that have finished in front of you, then you're a long way to being successful already. Olli Jones, he's making a big surge for it early in the race, 13 kilometres to go. And as I said, he is the Ben Hill of virtual cycling. He is very, very antisocial. 567 watts, nearly 8 watts per kilo. He's pushing 111 revs per minute, 180 beats per minute. He is absolutely flying up here, and he's seeing a reaction from your man, Kieran Lewis. Muller there as well, Jay Vine, Tim Cutler, Zach Johnson. All the strongest riders are coming to the front.
This is a huge move. You've said that it's early. Yeah, it is. Just inside 14 kilometres remaining. But in the women's race, it was Jong who made a move at around about this point and with roughly 5 or 6 their way back to the Kiwi.
Well, they are, and this group has absolutely splintered. There was about 85 riders in it before that surge of pace. A little bit of a coming together. Dalton Stretton up there, Nick White, Kieran Lewis, as we said, and Zach Johnson right up there as well. Freddie Ovett sliding into the top 10. Tim Cutler there, also Tom Benton, who's a strong rider that we can expect to be a factor in the top 10 by the end of the day. But that's going to really hurt the legs of the riders, and their heart rates will be exploding at the moment.
And Alastair Johnson, he's sitting in around about 15th or 16th position, followed pretty closely by Alex West, Alexander Evans and Ben Hill. So Alastair Johnson, we know he's got good form. This is Gary Muller, who is looking really strong. And again, Pat, you'd be pretty happy with that cadence up around 100.
Yeah, and look, we see all of the riders that are really sticking on here have a high cadence. But it is a select group of around 16 riders, as you suggested, Matt Keenan, and then it's a further 30 riders in the second group, in the chase group. So with 11 kilometres to go to the finish, that move could be the one that shapes today's race.
Well, it was early aggression by Olli Jones, and it has forced the first really significant split. And Olli Jones is still well placed. He's sitting in around about 6th position. Here comes Lewis.
Yes, well, Lewis is there, but it also looks like a fair coming.
Group?
Yeah, I think this is the second group we're looking at. Yep.
And I think that was Jack Carswell who was perhaps part of that group. And young Jack Carswell is a promising young cyclist.
Yes,
the Kiwi. In fact, he's in the front group. Jack Carswell is one of the youngest riders in this race. His dad, Tim, has been a national representative for New Zealand, part of the coaching structure in New Zealand. Jack is now coached by Greg Henderson, and I'm not sure whether it's the pleasure or the mispleasure to have a couple of rides online with Jack Carswell on a Sunday morning with a group organised by Coach Hendy, and he's a fantastic young guy based on the online conversation that we've had through the Zwift companion. But geez, he's got some horsepower, and this is a prospect to watch. Keep an eye out for Jack Carswell.
Well, you can always say that you rode with him, Matt Keenan. It doesn't matter if you rode for 500 metres of the 20-kilometre ride, you rode with him, and that's all the facts that need to be stated. But yes, a coming together of this group, so around 25, 30 riders, and it was the big surge of pace from Mark O'Brien and Nick White from behind that also dragged this man across, Graham Frisley, and he's got to be one of the favourites. They want to get rid of him at 88 revs per minute. Heart rate a little high, but you'd expect that after that big turn of foot to get back into this front group. And he's sitting around that 4 watts per kilo at just over 300 watts.
And sun's out, guns out for Graham Frisley, trying to stop the motor from completely frying. Don't overcook, Graham. Hang in there, looking good. At this point, it's a little difficult, Pat, but somehow he just needs to get the heart rate down a couple of beats. But the difficulty is, the others want Graham Frisley to explode because they know how fast he is at the finish. He's a guy that they need to get rid of.
Oh, yes, 100%. But this next 2 kilometres will give him a chance to drop that heart rate a little bit as we see the negative 3% in the top right-hand corner, just above the positions of the riders. So they're on a downhill sector for around the next 2 kilometres. Then they have that false flat of around 1% before kicking it back up again. And I think that we can expect Olli Jones to do version 2 of what he did last lap and try and split this field and go all the way to the line.
Yeah, there's a big chance. Here's Jesse Norton now up towards the front.
Yeah, I'm really happy to see him up there tonight.
Not biased at all? Not biased
no,
at all,
I am
Pat?
very biased indeed, but particularly any of the young riders. I saw Dalton Stretton up there before. Pat Eddy tried to make this front group. I don't know if he's still there, but certainly Zach Johnson also right up there as well. Lack from GPM Stalls Racing, he has been really, really strong the last week, so it's great to see Lack continuing with that form. Alex West, Matt Keenan, much like Olli Jones, and they race together in the Canyon team on Zwift. He is definitely one to look for an attack on that incline coming up in about 2.5 kilometres. They are a really strong two-pronged attack team.
Well, again, I don't know what his maximum heart rate is, but his current heart rate, it looks relatively low because it's just at around that 150 mark by comparison to what we saw before with Graham Frisley. And looking at Alex's stats from last week, His average heart rate was 171 with a max of 183. So the Kiwi, Alex West, has still got plenty of bullets to fire in this race. There's a lot of range still to come from West.
Yes, but after that downhill sector, we would expect the heart rate to drop a little bit. Ben Hill at 153. Right at the back of the pack, though, he's going to want to move up a little bit up the pack now. Ben Hill, well experienced on Zwift. He's actually got the same colour shoes in real life too, which is pretty cool to see those fluorescent green shoes turning around, and the riders use them in training more often than not, just to be safe on the roads. So he's got to move his way up the pack, because if they get another surge like Olli Jones did last lap, I don't think we'll see it coming together of the pack for a second time.
Well, this group has been reduced down to around about 24 or so, and amongst those who have missed the split, Alastair Johnson is at 16 seconds, the winner of race number 2 in the National Road Series on Zwift. So that highlights just how tough the tempo is at the front.
Yeah, well, actually, now that you've given me a second just to scroll through the list a little bit there, I've pinpointed a rider, and I've got to give a shout out. Love the young riders. Under 15, Elijah Lewis. Great riding, young man. That is an exceptional effort. He's sitting in 19th position at the moment. As we look at Chris Aiken, he was 8th in the first stage last week. Can he reproduce the same this week? And remember, if you participate, you don't have to finish in the top 10, you don't have to win, but if you participate in all 8 of the SRAM Send It Series events this season, you go into the draw to win that great SRAM prize pack, as well as the Zip 303Ss. And Matt, I was saying earlier in the women's broadcast, I've got a set coming. They're coming in about 6 weeks, and I can't wait. Lifetime guarantee on the wheels, but how can you go wrong? Carbon fibre, out training, gives you and I a chance to stay with the bunch now.
It won't be a slow bunch for me to keep up. The SRAM group set that you're in with a chance to win if you do ride all 8 of the SRAM Send It Series events is the SRAM Force ETAP Access Disc Group set. Back on the front, we've got the German Philipp Digna, who is applying the pressure, and this group continues to get reduced.
Well, yes, there is significant pressure on the front, and we can tell that by the 8 watts per kilo being produced by Digna. 470, 490, he continues to accelerate. This pressure is being felt throughout the pack as well. So who's on the front really pressuring this lift in pace? I wouldn't be surprised to see Olli Jones or Alex as well. They're both really strong riders, and riders to watch for from the Canyon Racing team on Zwift. Right up there as well, Muller was strong last week. Matt Keenan, can you give us some insights? He's in Melbourne, isn't he?
I can't give you many insights on him. All I can tell you is that he's really strong, and I better do a little bit more research before next week. So anybody that wants to help me with my homework, please shoot me a message on Gary Muller, because he's been really, really impressive. Last week, he finished in 6th position. This week, he's been super active. Here's Olli Jones once again.
Yeah, Olli Jones, he's certainly always one to keep an eye on. It blows my mind how he stays in form so much throughout the year. But how's under 15 Lewis on the front of the pack? Olli Jones pushing nearly 7 watts per kilo to keep up with this young man. Big shout out for him. This is an impressive effort. Olli Jones still high cadence, Matt, so that bodes well for this attack that we would expect to see probably in the next 500 metres.
Just again on Gary Muller, there was a Gary Muller that rode for the Brunswick Cycling Club in the late 90s to early 2000s, and I'm assuming it's not that Gary making a comeback, because that Gary would be in his early 40s now. This is Olli Jones still at the front. You never know.
Anything's possible. Anything's possible, but I don't think so, Matt Keenan. Hedger, he leads the way. Jones getting ready to launch, and now we start to see moves from Dow, Nick White right up there, Lindsay close by, Lewis, who we spoke about earlier, as now we look at Muller from the Aussie Hump Day riding team, and that's on a Wednesday night. Tim Searle, big shout out. He runs a great setup there. Tim Cutler right up there as well, Matt Keenan, and this is looking like it's going to be a rampant finish.
Yeah, you can feel the intensity really starting to increase, and this could be a race of elimination from the back. This could be a tactical move at the front, Pat. It's Muller who is applying the pressure.
Well, he is. He's putting on the hurt, and he's out of the saddle. Out of the saddle is quite serious on Zwift. So if he's out of the saddle, you can see, though, he's riding that sort of tempo pace out of the saddle. He's not sprinting, but he is just applying a little extra pressure. He's obviously gone down a few gears. They're on a 3% incline. Heart rate's still good. So, Gary, big shout out. You're going well. Keep it up and keep hurting them. I love seeing them in pain.
It's a really impressive effort. Down to 5 kilometres remaining. They've covered the 16 Ks in just on 21 minutes. They have been flying. Around about 24 riders still in contention to take the win in race number 2 of the SRAM Send It Series.
Vine coming through and making sure we know that she is the brains of the outfit at Team Vine. Well, I think she's also finishing second to how the riders are moving along. Dalton Stretton still up there, under 19 rider. Freddie Ovett starts to slide into the top 10. This is really starting to heat up. Jay Vine, we haven't spoken much of him. There he is now, looking good, but out of the saddle, surging up the pack. 600 watts almost now. 8 watts per kilo he was pushing towards, and this is the breaking point of the race.
Yeah, these are huge numbers by Jay Vine. He is starting to make a move. He's heading towards the front. Kieran Lewis is also at the head of affairs. Jay Vine applying the pressure. This is just a little bit further down the road than where we saw the winning move in the women's race by Antoinette de Jong. Jay Vine, one of the pre-race favourites, the winner of last week's race.
Yes, and now a big surge from Muller. He starts to push almost 10 watts per kilo, and you can see that highlight in orange. Kieran Lewis starting to go into orange numbers as well. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the watts per kilo of the riders. It's Jay Vine on the front. He's just in front of Lack from GPM Stalls Racing, and this is a really strong performance from these riders.
Freddie Ovett. Last week it was a little easier to spot Freddie Ovett because he was wearing the white and blue colours of Israel Startup Nation. This time, though, he's in the SRAM kit, just like everybody else, but he's been conspicuous in his absence from a mention at the front. Is he waiting for a big burst at perhaps 1,500 metres to go? Don't put it beyond Freddie Ovett from that sort of tactic.
Oh, for sure. And a rider that has a really good endurance base. This is a good course for them tonight. I would have expected it to split up a bit more, but I think that just shows you just how good a field that we do have. Tom Benton right up there. He was up there on the weekend as well in the virtual NRS series. Zach Johnson, I've spoken about a few times. Maybe it's his chance to really slip out a nice victory. He's noted for finishing consistently in the top 5 against really quality fields in the Zwift series across the board in all racing series, should I say. So could he get the big win tonight? And also Jay Riley, he's right up there and he has knocked over some of the big names on Zwift recently, Matt Keenan.
Yes, we get down to just on 3 kilometres remaining. Dowdle putting the pressure on. And Gary Muller's never too far behind. In fact, this is the chasing pack. It's Gary Muller who is applying the pressure at the front. He's showing plenty of strength and ever aggressive at the head of the race. He wants a piece of the prize inside the top 3 on today's race. And why not go for the big win? Incidentally, Pat Graham Frisley is just
slipping off
at the back of the group. So too is your man, Jesse Norton. We're down to 21 riders in contention.
With just 2.4 kilometres to go, it's Alex Lack. He keeps putting pressure on the front with Muller. Alex Lack, I tell you, he's really exciting for when we go back out into the real-life racing. Going to keep an eye on him for GPM Stalls in the National Road Series because he's really put his name on the board. Dalton Stretton up there for Team Aero as well. Coming into our view, we've got Jay Vine right about the right mark as well. Tim Cutler still there. Now, there's a kid that's got a great aerobic capacity, should I say, as we see some figures from Alex Lack, who's really come to the forefront for us over the past few weeks.
And look at in 9th position, just momentarily on the screen. It's popped off now, but according to Zwift Power, he's still there. Elijah Lewis is in contention. He's under 15s.
He is a great young kid. I'll give him a big shout out earlier, and if he can finish this race tonight in the front group, that's phenomenal. 1.5 kilometres to go, Matt Keenan. They are absolutely flying. 19 kilometres covered in 26 minutes. Have you 20 kilometres covered in 26 minutes? That is phenomenal.
Alex Lack just slips off the front. He gets into the slipstream, looking for a little bit of recuperation. Still there at the front, another one of the youngsters. This time it's the Kiwi. Jack Carswell is also in contention. And this kid has a kick. Carswell can sprint.
Yeah, and we've spoken about power-ups, Matt Keenan. This is where you want to see the utilisation of the aero power-up. It makes you more aerodynamic for 15 seconds. Looks like an aero helmet in blue that'll pop up above the riders' heads, and that's now the time. You want to see that used at probably the 300 metre to go mark, and that's just 400 metres from now as we see a surge from Hopkins.
Hopkins, he's opened up the slightest of gaps. Olli Jones it is who's then chasing. This is game on now, Pat. Hopkins at 744 watts.
Yes, and Olli Jones, he doesn't want to make the same mistake as just 7 days earlier. He now takes over the lead. He hasn't used the power up yet. 330 metres to go. Will he time it to perfection this week? Or do we see Stretton and also Frizzley coming from behind? Nick White there as well. Ben Hill, this is a really strong finish.
Oh, look at the numbers of Olli Jones. Almost 1,000 watts. He's got the timing right on this occasion. Olli Jones has taken the win this time, Pat. He's got it right.
Yeah, he takes it out from Tom Benton, and then Nick White rounds out the podium. So some big names up there tonight. Great to see such a very strong race in both the men's and women's as we see our interim results pop up now, and it is Jones. He gets it right second time round. Tom Benton in second, Nick White, Graham Frizzley and Jay Vine, they round out the top five, but some big mentions, Dalton Stretton under 19, Jack Carswell under 19 as well. Significant performances from those two riders. And have a look at the evenness across the board, Matt Keenan. 5.4, 5.3 and 5.2 watts per kilo shows just how strong this field is.
Well, you tip to Olli Jones as super aggressive in this format. He was aggressive. He made that move with still 14 Ks to go, and then he got the timing right with the sprint finish. Tom Benton in second position, and then Nick White. We hardly mention Nick throughout the race, which is really rare because he normally features up towards the front. But what about Graham Frizzley? It wasn't that long ago where Graham Frizzley looked like he was done for. He was in a group that was just slipping backwards. They were about 2 or 3 seconds off the back, but Olli Jones almost 1,000 watts across the last couple of 100 metres and holding that sort of power. It was phenomenal.
Ah, yes, a fantastic effort for him tonight. And Graham Frizzley's just shown us he's no longer that track cyclist that's just an endurance track cyclist. He is very versatile.
Yeah, Graham Frizzley has been consistent right throughout the season, both in the real world and in Zwift, and he is a name that is bursting through to significant promise. But it was Olli Jones who has managed to collect the victory. It was an outstanding ride by the Kiwi, and always nice to win when you were tipped and expected to win.
Yeah, well, Jay Vine said last week it's hard when you're going into a race as a favourite. He took out the win last week. Olli Jones takes it out this week. And let's see what happens in a fortnight's time in the National Road Series. But we're back here again on Tuesday to do it all again. Olli Jones, this is his winning move. And he didn't make the mistake this week. He pushed it all the way to the line. Tom Benton, big shout out. Really close there on the line. And we see that aero power up for Tom Benton expired right on the finish line. So timing to perfection.
Yeah, you spoke about the power-ups at the start of both the men's race and the women's race. Tom Benton is the guy that should perhaps do the tutorial before the next round of the SRAM Send It Series. He got it right. He got it bang on, and Nick White was right on his wheel and carried it through. But Nick still had about a second and a half of the power-up, so that could be the difference maker. They were only that 0.2 of a second off Olli, but this week he gets the win, and he's one of the big favourites on Zwift of all the people. He does a lot of the group rides during the week as well. So well done to Olli, and well done to our young riders factoring in that top 10 as well. Just to recap the top three in the men's, Olli Jones taking the win ahead of Tom Benton and then Nick White. The women's race, it was a dominant performance by Antoinette de Jong. She won solo and she broke away on her own with around about 5 kilometres remaining. Bree Vine was in second position. It was then Katie Banerjee who was in third place, followed by Nicole Frayne. Alana Foster in fifth. Bree Hargrave in sixth position. Kath Mackay was in seventh place. Laura Luxford in eighth. It was then Tia Froome in ninth position. And Bree Playell rounding out the top 10. Pat, a highlight from the night from you.
Oh, it's got to be Antoinette de Jong. That was just phenomenal. The ability to surge and create this split and then go on further with it and get the gap and ride all the way solo to the finish. I think she could have kept going. She hit the line still with a full stride. So that's definitely my major play of the day. But also I think there's been some great positives there for some of the younger riders. Fantastic to see Alana Foster in the front group in the women's as well, and I look forward to seeing them back at it again in 7 days' time.
Well, you stole my thunder with de Jong, so I'm going to go with my highlights coming from the men's results sheet. At the top, Olli Jones. That was the sort of result that we expect from Olli Jones. Tom Benton in second position, then Nick White, followed by Graham Frisley. Frisley was close to my highlight. Jay Vine in fifth position, Dalton Stretton in sixth place, Freddie Ovett seventh, Sam Lindsay in eighth position. In 10th place, it was Jesse Riley. But my highlight, Pat, Jack Carswell in ninth position. I think he's just 16 years of age. And we also saw Elijah Lewis at 15 years of age, still in that front group. Those two youngsters combined, their performance tonight, along with de Jong, the highlights for me.
Yeah, and fair call, Matt. And we're both big supporters of the youth coming up from underneath. And there's no harm in giving them a good shout out to show them that their hard work doesn't go unnoticed. And I'm sure there's a few proud parents watching the stream tonight. So big shout out to the support crew. Thanks for all your comments in the Facebook feed as well. And as always, it's great to bring you the action.
The good thing about this format, they don't have to just watch the live stream. They can be right there next to them. And hopefully you do watch the live stream and you join us next week for more from the SRAM Send It series. Until then, on behalf of Pat Shaw and myself, Matthew Keenan, it's bye for now.